Welcome back to Wellness Wednesday with Dr. Gaynor Speaks. I am your host, Dr. Brianna Gaynor. And today we are talking about the concerning trend of people turning to AI for therapy. So, as I get into this conversation, I actually had not heard of this until more recently. And so I'm going to provide some information that, if you haven't heard of it, is going to be disturbing, but it is very important that we start to have this conversation so that as these things are happening, we can start to identify the potential risk and harm for ourselves and for our loved ones. So, in this fast paced, ever changing world, we have to get really frank about what's concerning about this phenomenon, the risks, the limitations. This is not just theoretical, this is actually happening. And so I am going to tell you 4 major risk areas that I see as an effect of this trend of people seeking therapy from AI. The first is an inadequate crisis response. So, number 1, inadequate crisis response. AI at its core is a pattern matching algorithm. It's not a sentiment. It cannot genuinely understand the depth of human despair or emotion or, frankly, urgency. So I want to imagine that there's a caller. Let's call her Tiffany. And let's say that Tiffany is in a deep, dark place and she is typing into a chatbot and she's expressing passive suicidal thoughts. A human therapist is trained to hear the subtle cues, to assess risk, to mobilize emergency services if necessary, and to convey genuine concern and to provide the support that's needed in a crisis situation. AI, it may respond with a generic, "I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. It sounds really difficult." Or if there's a programming error, it could also completely miss the cue altogether. This is not just a mistake, it is downright life or death. And it can create a failure that can cost someone their life, that could have completely changed the situation. And these systems lack the critical judgment needed to really identify what needs to happen in crisis situations. Which takes us to number 2, which is the empathy gap. Therapy isn't just about words exchanged. It is about the therapeutic alliance, the unspoken bond, the feeling of being seen and heard by another human being. A therapist picks up on the quiver in your voice, holding a tear back. Most importantly, those nonverbal social cues that tend to be at least 80% of our communication. That's how we build trust and we facilitate real healing. But an AI cannot mimic empathy. It can say that sounds really challenging, but it doesn't feel your pain. It can't share in your joys when you have a breakthrough. The human connection is irreplaceable. And what using AI can inadvertently do is isolate people even more than we've been isolated with the changes that came with the pandemic over the last 5 years. And when you're isolated, it can make you feel even more alone. It can make you feel even more desperate. It can create even more hopelessness because you're not confessing to a human who can provide support and help, but you are confessing your deepest fears to a void that really cannot give you what you need or lead you to the person who may be able to help you with what you're struggling with. This third risk is algorithmic bias. So we have to remember that as helpful as AI is, it gives us amazing responses. It also is trained on massive data sets from the internet. Again, algorithmic bias. It is trained on massive data sets from the internet. And the internet is filled with human biases like racism, sexism, homophobia, you name it. The list goes on. And if AI is trained on data that underrepresents some populations or contains prejudiced viewpoints in general about any community, then its advice can very well reflect those biases. So there was a real world example actually with an AI chatbot. So it was from a major mental health organization, and it was actually giving harmful advice to people who had eating disorders before it was taken down. So imagine a person of color who is seeking therapy for racial trauma, and an AI primarily trained on data from white perspectives minimizes their experience or gives tone deaf advice. or gives advice that's extremely biased or racist that can actually reinforce the trauma they've already experienced. It isn't just unhelpful, it's downright dangerous and can reinforce trauma and also lead to avoidance of actually seeking the help that's needed because you're connecting what AI is saying to what actual therapy would do. Now, like I said, this is a real life example of what happened with a major mental health organization. So we will link some articles so that you can actually click on the links and see exactly what we're talking about. Again, this is a dangerous trend that's happening, and it's going to be really important that we are paying attention because even when something sounds helpful, when we think it's easier just to type it in, thinking of the ramifications and the fact that AI cannot completely replace what humans are trained to do is really essential to this phenomenon. Which takes us to risk number 4, which is the therapeutic misconception. And that's the most widespread risk. And so this term originates from medical ethics. And so therapeutic misconception refers to the phenomenon where users, often without realizing it, overestimate the capabilities of AI and underestimate the associated risks. They see the word therapy on the app and they think that it's the equivalent of a licensed professional. I need support. I need therapy. This is where I'm going. I'm seeking help. And so they don't realize that behind the smooth conversation is a system that has no legal or ethical obligation to protect them, isn't licensed, and isn't governed by HIPAA. The importance of that is that HIPAA protects your private information. There are huge stipulations if your private information gets out there, and there are a lot of safeguards in place to keep you safe so that when you're going to therapy, when you're seeking mental health, medical care, whatever care you're seeking, it's private. And that's really important for us to feel secure about who we're seeing and to know that not just anyone get into our private information, but when you are using AI, none of those things apply. And so it leads to the misconception that you're getting the same security as you do with human-led therapy, which is a dangerous illusion, because when we start to misperceive that the information we're getting is actually safe, we are putting ourselves at risk. And there are going to be no repercussions for that because they are not sanctioned by HIPAA. They are not licensed. They have no obligation whatsoever. So while technology is fascinating and it's exciting and it makes life easier, there's also a lot of caution that can be involved that we really need to take hold of. It's a tool. AI can be used for a lot of different things, but it's deeply flawed and potentially dangerous when misrepresented. Again, we're talking about therapy. We're talking about really discussing some of the most sensitive information, really gaining the support that we need and seeking help when we are really in a deep, dark place and don't know what to do. The internet, in and of itself, is not meant to replace therapy at all. And this is a conversation we need to have. We need to know these risks so that we're not putting ourselves at a risk that we're not even aware of. And also so that we can pay attention for our loved ones, for our children, for our students, for our nieces, for our nephews, for all the people around us in our sphere of influence. Let's keep each other safe. And let's understand that AI cannot replace therapy. So if we're experiencing any significant risk, harm, struggles, we need support. We want to seek an actual licensed therapist who is trained to help, who can pick up on human nuances that the internet cannot, and who is ethically obligated to keep your information safe and secure. So I want to know what you guys think. Have you encountered these risks? Have you even heard of this before? Tell me what you think in the comments. And for more resources on finding safe and effective and ethical mental health support that will support you with wherever you are, you can visit us at peaceofmindpsychology.com. Before I go, I want to remind you about my new book, Nina's Smile. It is not just a book for kids. It is about dealing with difficult situations and being resilient and being able to overcome all the risks that we can experience. There is also a workbook in the back which helps you to kind of think through how you manage emotions, how you have dealt with struggles before, and help you to really see growth and resilience in life's biggest challenges. You can find more information about Nina Smile on drbrianagaynor.com or Amazon or anywhere that you can find books. And follow us on all platforms. Dr. Gaynor Speaks, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We look forward to seeing you next time. Stay safe and be careful out there. Be well.